Hazel Drew adjusted her worn cardigan as she arranged a small stack of books on the charity shop's main display table. The soft hum of conversation mixed with the distant clatter of footsteps from outside as a modest stream of customers drifted in and out during the afternoon lull. The sun filtered through the front windows, casting a warm glow over the faded wooden shelves, their surfaces crowded with gently used coats, trinkets, and everything in between. Hazel's fingers traced the spines of a few novels, her mind briefly wandering to the day's to-do list: restock the vintage china, tidy the donation corner, and maybe find a moment to chat with Mr. Morris about the upcoming fundraiser. Her quiet reverie was broken by the sharp click of polished shoes on the tiled floor. Turning, Hazel spotted Mr. Carlton striding past the entrance, the kind of man whose tailored suit and expensive watch seemed to hum of privilege. Known in the neighborhood for generous donations yet infamous for a curt demeanor, his arrival always stirred a ripple of unease among the shop's volunteers. Today was no different. Hazel straightened instinctively, offering the polite nod that had become a reflex whenever he appeared. But Mr. Carlton's gaze barely flicked in her direction, instead scanning the cluttered aisles with thinly veiled disdain. Without pausing, he placed a large, rather elegant box on the counter and muttered something about "these old things" before turning his back. Hazel's smile faltered but remained polite. "Thank you, Mr. Carlton," she said softly, stepping closer. "If you need any help, I'm here." He barely glanced her way. "I suppose someone should manage this mess," he said with a sneer, "though I doubt it matters." The chill in his voice was unmistakable, and Hazel felt a sting of embarrassment as several nearby customers shifted their attention toward the brief exchange. The tension settled heavily in the room, and Hazel wondered what was coming next. Hazel stood behind the counter, her fingertips brushing lightly over the worn wood as she watched Mr. Carlton's sharp eyes rake over the modest shelves lined with donated goods. She forced herself to keep her posture steady, even as an uncomfortable flush crept up her neck. A few customers nearby shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the dour man and Hazel, whose quiet demeanor just moments before had filled the room with a calm that now felt fragile, as if it might shatter with the smallest provocation. Mr. Carlton tapped the edge of the box impatiently, his gaze rolling over the shop with a clear message: disdain. "Is this all you have?" "Disorganized clutter masquerading as charity," he said loudly, voice dripping with condescension. A flicker of surprise passed through the room, like a stone tossed into still water, sending ripples of murmurs from those seated near the windows. Hazel's breath hitched for the barest moment. She had come to expect unkind remarks in the world of charity work. After all, the modest shop could never compete with the gleam of corporate philanthropy. But to be called incompetent so openly, in front of strangers and friends, stung more sharply than she expected. Yet she remained composed. "We do the best we can with what we have," she replied, voice steady but soft. "Every donation here means someone else will have a chance at a better day." Mr. Carlton scoffed. "Words won't organize your mess, miss. I gave a donation, and I expect it to be treated with respect. Unlike this," he gestured broadly at the shelves, "which looks like it belongs in a junkyard." His eyes locked onto Hazel, pinning her with a look that made her feel suddenly exposed, small beneath the weight of his disdain. A heavy silence fell across the shop. A couple of elderly women exchanging glances muttered under their breath, a few younger customers exchanged uneasy looks. Hazel bit her lip to keep from responding with anger. She had seen this before, the type of donor who saw charity workers as obstacles rather than partners. Trying to defuse the situation, Hazel stepped closer, hoping to bridge the gap before it widened. "If you'd like, I can help unpack and organize your donation," she offered. "We appreciate every gift, and I'd be happy to make sure it's handled carefully." Mr. Carlton's lip twitched in contempt. "I don't need help from a clerk who can barely keep a shop tidy. I want to speak with your manager, someone who actually understands how things should be run." Hazel's stomach tightened with a mix of frustration and embarrassment. The store manager, a kindly woman named Mrs. Green, was busy assisting another customer at the back, her attention momentarily diverted. Hazel turned her gaze toward her, hoping for a friendly nod or support, but Mrs. Green's expression was cautious, caught between managing the situation and not escalating it. "Mr. Carlton," Hazel said firmly but politely, "I'm the one who handles incoming donations. If you'd like, I can assure you they'll be catalogued correctly." He laughed, a sharp, dry sound that cut through the quiet. "You? I doubt it." From somewhere near the door, a volunteer gasped softly, almost inaudibly. Hazel caught the brief flicker of sympathy in her colleague's eyes, but it wasn't enough to stop Mr. Carlton, who seemed determined to make a spectacle. "Security," he called out suddenly, voice booming. A few heads snapped toward the door, then back to Hazel, confusion and concern mingling in the air. Hazel's heart pounded fiercely, a wave of shame rushing over her as a burly security guard approached, scanning the room. "What's the problem here?" the guard asked, voice low but firm. "My donation is being mishandled," Mr. Carlton declared loudly. "This person refuses to properly acknowledge the value of my contribution. I insist she be removed for incompetence." Hazel's eyes widened, disbelief blending with humiliation. People were watching. The customers in the shop murmured, some shifting closer, as if waiting to witness the fallout. Quietly, Hazel shook her head. "There's no reason for that. I'm doing my job." "Enough," Mr. Carlton snapped. "This behavior is unacceptable. Escort her out or I'll be forced to take my donations elsewhere, and spread the word about this disgrace." The guard looked from Hazel to Mr. Carlton, eyes flicking for a moment with uncertainty. Mrs. Green finally approached, her calm presence attempting to restore order. "Mr. Carlton, please," she said gently but firmly, "we appreciate your generosity, but we do not tolerate threats or disrespect toward our staff or volunteers." Mr. Carlton, emboldened yet tactful under Mrs. Green's words, slammed one hand down on the counter. "I want to speak to your supervisor." Mrs. Green gave a tight smile. "I am the store manager. Now, please, if you have concerns, let's discuss them calmly. But I will not stand for this clerk's incompetence." Hazel's throat tightened. She could hardly look at the man who had made a private sanctuary feel like a courtroom. Her cheeks burned with the eyes upon her, every whisper a needle prick. She wished she could disappear, retreat into the woodwork, but her hands remained steady beneath the counter. A small group of customers, mostly regulars who knew Hazel's quiet dedication, exchanged sympathetic looks. Two women near the door whispered quietly, one frowning. A young couple hesitated before stepping over to the counter and quietly telling Hazel they appreciated her kindness earlier that week. It was a small solace amid the rising storm. Mrs. Green gently placed a hand on Hazel's shoulder. "Let's not escalate this," she murmured softly. "I'll handle it." Hazel nodded, grateful for the support yet still shaking, if only inside. She had faced dismissal many times before but never so public or biting. Mr. Carlton's voice rose again, now louder and sharper. "This place is a joke. And anyone associated with it, including you, is too blind to see it." The guard cleared his throat, standing tall like a silent wall. Hazel's gaze dropped to the floor as whispers turned to murmurs of discomfort and murmurs of disagreement, and a few younger customers shuffled away. What would you do if you were standing here? Hazel wondered to herself, clutching the edge of the counter. The helplessness was palpable, but something deeper nudged beneath her unease, a quiet fire sparking into life. Underneath the waves of frustration and shame, Hazel's thoughts rifled through memories, skills buried beneath layers of charity shop routine. The cold dismissal of her knowledge, the arrogance she faced, it all built into a tension she wasn't ready to release just yet. Everyone was watching. The air hung heavy with expectation, the moment stretched taut, like a breath held too long. Hazel could feel eyes flicking between her and Mr. Carlton, curiosity mixed with quiet judgment. For a few precious seconds, it felt as if the whole room held its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. Would she retreat, allowing the weight of the moment to crush her confidence? Or would she shatter the assumptions pressed upon her like heavy chains? The surge of anxiety, the bite of humiliation, these were the colors Hazel was painting on the canvas of this afternoon. But beneath the surface, something new, something sharp and steady, was beginning to pulse. As Mr. Carlton continued to mutter complaints, his voice slowly losing its authoritative edge, Hazel prepared to reveal a part of herself few had reason to expect. The shop seemed suddenly smaller, the walls tighter, as if the entire room leaned forward, waiting for the next move in this quiet drama. And with the world watching, Hazel's moment was coming. Hazel took a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter. The murmurs in the shop settled into a charged silence as everyone waited to see how she would respond. Mr. Carlton's scowl deepened, clearly expecting submission or excuses. Instead, Hazel found a reservoir of calm she hadn't known was there, a quiet confidence that settled like steady ground beneath her feet. "If it's expertise you doubt," Hazel began, voice low but clear, "then perhaps I can demonstrate." Her eyes met Mr. Carlton's, unwavering. She could see surprise flicker briefly in his expression, quickly masked by arrogance, but it was enough. Reaching beside her, Hazel carefully lifted the lid of the large box he had placed on the counter. Inside, the layers of tissue paper shimmered faintly under the soft light, revealing an assortment of delicate objects, vintage jewelry, an intricately carved wooden box, and what appeared to be an old porcelain figurine delicately painted. Others leaned in, drawn by the shift in tone, curiosity sparking quietly in their eyes. "May I?" Hazel asked, glancing towards the shop manager, Mrs. Green, who nodded encouragingly from her place nearby. Carefully, Hazel unfolded the paper wrapping one piece at a time, examining each artifact with measured attention. Her fingers traced the fine details of the wooden box's brass hinges, her eyes narrowing in concentration. To the casual observer, this was just a humble assortment of second-hand goods, but Hazel's gaze carried the weight of years spent in galleries and auction houses, places far removed from this small charity shop. "This box," she said, holding it up for the room to see, "is a mid-century keepsake with artisan craftsmanship. The brass inlay suggests it was made in northern Italy, probably in the 1950s. It's quite valuable, especially if kept in good condition." Gasps rippled quietly among the customers gathered near the counter. Hazel's voice softened as she shifted to the porcelain figurine, turning it with care. "This figurine," she explained, "is by a lesser-known artist, but the paint is remarkably well preserved. Pieces like this can often fetch good prices at auction, which ultimately helps boost the charity's fund significantly." Eyes widened as Hazel delicately lifted an ornate brooch from the box. "And this, it's an early 20th century costume piece but made with remarkable detail. The clasp is a key indicator that it might have been part of a theatrical costume or perhaps belonged to a collector." Mr. Carlton's smug expression tightened. His lips pressed into a thin line, a silent acknowledgement of the unexpected turn. Hazel continued, unruffled by his presence. "I do appreciate donations of all kinds, but knowing their value helps us maximize the good we can do. Many of these items will find new homes where their history is cherished." Mrs. Green edged closer, a smile of pride softening her own usual reserve. The few volunteers nearby exchanged amazed glances, whispering quietly about Hazel's knowledge. Some customers nodded appreciatively, their earlier discomfort replaced by respect. The once harsh atmosphere softened as Hazel handled each piece with care and insight. Even Mr. Carlton found himself losing his earlier bravado, the certainty in his gaze replaced by a reluctant fascination. The crowd's opinions shifted, murmurs turned to whispers of admiration, some faces lighting up with new understanding. Finally, Hazel gently closed the box. "If you like, Mr. Carlton, I'd be happy to catalog these items properly and ensure they receive the attention they deserve." Silence stretched for a moment before Mr. Carlton cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. didn't realize. His gaze flickered away briefly, before settling back on Hazel with something closer to grudging respect. The customers, volunteers, and staff watched as the weight of his earlier arrogance seemed to dissolve not with theatrics but quiet competence. Hazel stepped back, a subtle smile touching her lips, as if to say that her work spoke louder than words. A ripple of laughter broke out, soft at first, then growing. Not at Hazel, but at Mr. Carlton, the man who had once scorned the shop and now found himself upended by the very clerk he had dismissed. One elderly woman, seated nearby, chuckled and whispered, "Well, that's a lesson in humility." Mrs. Green gave Hazel a warm nod, her eyes shining with approval. "I'm glad you stayed," she said softly. "You showed the true heart of this place." Hazel's chest swelled with quiet pride. The humiliation earlier, the whispers and stares, they seemed distant now, erased by the unfolding respect. In this room filled with well-worn shelves and softly buzzing conversations, something had shifted. For Hazel, it wasn't just about the items or the donations. It was proof that value often lies beneath the surface, waiting for someone to recognize it. Mr. Carlton bowed his head for a fraction of a second, his earlier disdain tempered by the weight of Hazel's unexpected expertise. The customers smiled at her, grateful for the reminder that strength and knowledge could quietly illuminate even the most unassuming places. And just like that, the balance tilted. Hazel no longer felt the smallness that had clutched at her heart when Mr. Carlton first walked in. She held her head high, the respect she earned unfolding like a quiet victory, unspoken but deeply understood. After the murmur of astonished whispers began to settle like a calming tide, Hazel drew her cardigan more tightly around her slender frame and allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply. Even as the small crowd dispersed and the late afternoon sun began casting longer shadows between the worn shelves, the room asked silent questions. Who was this unassuming woman who had so effortlessly transformed the moment? Mrs. Green approached, her kindly eyes resting on Hazel with renewed warmth. "You surprised us all," she said softly. "This place has always benefited from your care, but there's so much more than we ever knew." Hazel's smile was quiet but genuine, and for a moment she allowed herself to reveal a part of her story that few had guessed before. "I used to work as an art appraiser," she began, her voice tinged with a hint of nostalgia. "For over a decade, I was with one of the larger auction houses in the city. It was a world of polished floors, refined clients, and hours spent cataloging and valuing pieces few people understood." She glanced around at the shop's humble surroundings, the scuffed floors, the faded wallpaper, the mismatched chairs, and the ripple of surprise on the faces of nearby volunteers and customers. Leaving that world was a choice I made slowly but deliberately. I wanted something different, something that felt more real. Helping people directly, here in the community, keeps me grounded. Some volunteers exchanged glances, their understanding deepening. It was easy to underestimate someone based on their appearance. Hazel's simple cardigan and modest dress masked a depth of skill and experience few had expected. It wasn't just about organizing goods or receiving donations but about truly seeing their worth, whether monetary or human. She explained more, voice steady and sincere. "Dressing simply has become part of that choice too. When you work in a place like this, it's not about impressing others, it's about respect and empathy. I don't need luxury to feel fulfilled." Mrs. Green's eyes shimmered with admiration. "You've brought more than just organization here, Hazel. You've brought dignity and hope." Hazel felt a warm blush, not from pride but from a sense of belonging. The shop, once just a pause in her journey, had become a place of purpose. She recounted small moments, meeting a young mother who found a better path through the shop's support, a man who rediscovered his confidence by volunteering, the silent gratitude behind every donated coat handed out on a cold day. Her history wasn't about grand triumphs or dramatic escapes but quiet dedication. In helping the shop serve others, Hazel found herself healing, too, from a lifetime of chasing approval in halls of wealth and prestige. Here, Her worth wasn't measured by price tags or social status but by the simple impact she could make day by day. The revelation seemed to bring the space alive in a new way. Customers lingered longer, conversations grew softer but richer, and the shop's atmosphere shifted subtly from one of quiet charity to genuine community. Hazel's story, her past woven with her present, resonated like a delicate thread connecting everyone there. Still, there was an unspoken anticipation, a sense that the afternoon's events had set something in motion. Hazel's unexpected display of knowledge hadn't just changed a few minds, it had unsettled preconceived notions, particularly Mr. Carlton's. What would come next was uncertain, but deep inside, Hazel felt ready. She was stronger now, tempered by challenge and steady in her purpose. Mrs. Green's voice broke the reflective silence. Today reminded me why we do this. It's not about illusions or appearances, it's about the heart. And Hazel, you've shown us yours. Hazel nodded, feeling the weight of that simple truth settle warmly within her. Her journey was not defined by where she'd been but by the people she served and the moments they shared. And though the shop was small and its windows often overlooked, beneath it all was a determination and grace that could not be denied. Outside, the late sun dipped lower, casting golden hues across the street. Hazel glanced toward the door, imagining the coming days, uncharted but promising in their challenge. The quiet dignity she brought to this work was far from over. "I'm glad you stayed," Mrs. Green repeated gently. "We needed you too." Hazel smiled, a calm certainty anchoring her to this place she called home now. Whatever the future held, she would meet it with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the art world and now through this humble charity shop, a strength that many had overlooked but none could ignore. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a soft light filtering through the charity shop's large windows as Hazel swung open the door, ready to begin her day. The memory of the previous afternoon's confrontation lingered like a faint echo, but it no longer weighed heavily on her spirit. Instead, she carried a steady confidence, a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had risen above the harsh judgment that had threatened to dim her light. Mrs. Green was already inside, tidying up the shelves with a gentle energy that seemed to renew the room itself. Her smile brightened the moment Hazel entered. "Good morning," she greeted warmly. "You should know, Mr. Carlton won't be coming back." Hazel raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "He was escorted out by security earlier this morning," Mrs. Green explained. "After what happened, and given his attitude, the board decided it wasn't worth the trouble. They made it clear that anyone who disrupts our mission will not be welcome here." Hazel nodded, relief mingling with a quiet sense of vindication. It felt like a small victory, not just for her, but for the dignity of the shop and its community. She had refused to be humiliated, and in doing so, had reclaimed her space. As the day unfolded, visitors trickled in, many offering kind words or lingering with smiles of encouragement. One regular, an older gentleman named Mr. Thomas, approached Hazel with a warm handshake. "You handled yourself well yesterday, Hazel," he said. "It's not often you see such grace under fire." Hazel returned the handshake, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. It means a lot." The volunteers gathered for their midday break, chatting quietly about what had transpired. The mood among them was buoyant, and Hazel sensed a renewed camaraderie. This shared experience had fortified their sense of purpose. They weren't just caretakers of old goods, but guardians of something far more precious. Then the unexpected happened. Late in the afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside the shop's modest entrance. Hazel watched as a sharply dressed man stepped out and approached the door. It was Mr. Carlton, though this time his manner was subdued, his bluster noticeably absent. Mrs. Green met him briefly at the entrance, their conversation muted but intense. Later, Mrs. Green returned inside, her expression thoughtful. "He's offered compensation for the disruption he caused," she informed Hazel. "A considerable donation, actually." Hazel's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Yes, Mrs. Green replied. He seems to have realized the value in respect and understanding. It's not lost on anyone that your knowledge played a part in that. Hazel felt a complex mix of emotions: surprise, reluctant satisfaction, and a quiet hope that maybe even the most hardened attitudes could soften with time. It wasn't about the money, though the donation would undoubtedly help, but about the recognition that kindness and expertise deserved respect. As evening approached, Hazel found herself alone in the shop for a few moments, breathing in the comforting scent of well-worn wood and folded fabric. The events of the past day, Mr. Carlton's arrogance, the public humiliation, her own quiet defiance, replayed gently in her mind. What had started as a simple act of snubbing had ended with a shift, subtle but profound, in the balance of power and respect. She thought about those watching her during the confrontation, the customers, the volunteers, the neighbors. She wondered what they'd take from it, what they'd remember if they ever faced something similar. Hazel gazed at the box of donations still waiting to be catalogued. She ran her fingers over the delicately carved wood and worn porcelain, feeling the history and stories nestled within. It was a reminder that even in simplicity, there is richness; even in the overlooked, there is value. Her phone buzzed, and a message from a friend appeared. Heard what happened? Proud of you. You showed them all what real strength looks like. Hazel smiled softly and typed a quick thanks. Moments like this stitched together the fabric of her resilience, enhancing the quiet dignity that day by day defined her spirit. She thought about Mr. Carlton again and the subtle lesson he had learned, that everyone deserves respect, no matter the setting or circumstance. Hazel's journey wasn't about exposing arrogance or winning arguments. It was about living with integrity and letting actions speak louder than harsh words. The shop bell tinkled as a new customer entered, and Hazel's attention shifted forward. There were more donations to accept, more people to help, and more moments to weave kindness into a world that often forgot to pause. The day closed with a sense of hopeful anticipation and steady resolve. Hazel's story had touched lives beyond what she could see or measure. It was a quiet triumph, not measured in grand gestures but in the steady, unwavering claim of self-worth. To those watching from wherever they might be, Hazel extended a soft invitation. What would you do if you were in her shoes? How would you hold your own when faced with scorn or injustice? Her path was a gentle reminder that beneath the everyday struggles lies the power to rise, to teach, and to inspire. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts. Your voice matters, and we look forward to welcoming you with our next story. See you soon.